I lied for him. I protected him. I destroyed evidence for him, line by line, file by file, telling myself it was loyalty, telling myself this was how careers were built, how trust was earned in rooms people like me weren't supposed to enter. And the whole time, I had no idea I was helping him hide her. That night, I was sitting in my car outside the office, rain tapping against the windshield like it had something to say, my phone lighting up my face with a message I didn't understand yet. "You need to see this." I remember staring at it, feeling something shift in my chest before I even opened it, like my body already knew what my mind hadn't caught up to. Because the woman my boss was sleeping with, wasn't just anyone. Before we go any further, before the truth starts to unfold piece by piece, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about an affair, or office politics, or ambition. It's about how far someone can be pushed before they realize they were never part of the game, only a piece on the board. And by the time I understood that, everything I thought I knew about my job, my boss, and even myself, had already started to fall apart. My name is Zaire Holloway, and a year before that night in the parking lot, I was exactly where I had always wanted to be. I worked at a consulting firm in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where deals were made behind glass walls and quiet conversations carried more weight than contracts. I wasn't born into that world. I learned it, step by step, mistake by mistake, watching how people spoke, how they paused, how they decided who mattered and who didn't. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. That feeling didn't come from the job itself. It came from one person. Darius Kane. Darius wasn't just my boss. He was the kind of man people adjusted their tone for without realizing it. Calm, precise, always 2 steps ahead of every conversation, every negotiation, every person in the room. He had a way of looking at you like he already knew what you were capable of before you did. And when he started paying attention to me, really paying attention, it changed everything. Promotions came faster. Invitations to meetings I wasn't supposed to be in started showing up on my calendar. People who used to overlook me started asking for my input. It felt earned, but it also felt like something else, something quieter, something I didn't question at the time. Because when someone like Darius Kane chooses you, you don't ask why. You just keep up. The first time he asked me to do something that didn't feel right, it didn't come with pressure. That's what made it easy to say yes. It was late, the office nearly empty, the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel louder than it is. He called me into his office, closed the door behind me, and for a moment, it felt like one of those conversations that would move my career forward again. Instead, he handed me a folder and asked me to clean up a few things. A few emails, a couple of calendar entries, nothing major, just details that needed to disappear. He said it like it was routine, like this was part of the job I had stepped into without realizing it. And I remember hesitating, just for a second, before telling myself it was nothing. That second mattered more than I understood at the time. Because once you say yes the first time, the next time feels smaller. And the time after that barely feels like a decision at all. The requests became more frequent, more specific. Delete this thread. Adjust that timestamp. Make it look like this meeting never happened. And every time I told myself the same thing. This is how things work at this level. This is what trust looks like. This is what it means to be on the inside. But there was one detail that kept showing up, quiet but consistent, a name that didn't belong anywhere it appeared. Imani Voss. At first, it was just a line in a calendar entry that needed to be removed. Then it was an email chain that had to be erased entirely. Then it was a visitor log that didn't match the official schedule. She wasn't listed as a client. She wasn't an employee. There was no department, no title, no record that explained why her name kept crossing my screen. And yet, she was there, again and again, like a shadow attached to something I couldn't see clearly. I didn't ask about her. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I understood the unspoken rule by then. You don't ask questions that don't come with answers. Still, curiosity has a way of growing in silence. It builds slowly, connecting pieces you didn't realize you were collecting. A late-night meeting that didn't exist on paper. A security camera that cut out for exactly 7 minutes. A phone call Darius stepped outside to take, even though he never stepped outside for anything. And then one night, without meaning to, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. A reflection in the glass wall of the conference room. 2 figures standing closer than colleagues should. His posture, unmistakable. Hers, just out of focus. And then they moved, just enough for me to realize this wasn't speculation anymore. It was real. That should have been the moment I stepped back. The moment I stopped saying yes. But that's not how it works when you've already gone too far. By then, I wasn't just helping. I was involved. Every file I had touched, every record I had changed, every trace I had erased connected me to something bigger than I understood. Walking away didn't feel like an option. It felt like a risk. And risks, in that environment, don't stay contained. They spread. They reach people. They follow you home. The message I received that night in my car didn't come from a number I recognized. There was no name attached, no explanation, just those 5 words. You need to see this. I sat there longer than I should have, staring at the screen, replaying every decision that had led me to that moment. Because deep down, I already knew this wasn't going to be something small. This wasn't going to be another detail I could fix, another record I could clean up. This was something else. Something that didn't need me to understand it to affect me. And when I finally opened the message, when the image loaded and the truth started to take shape, the first thing I felt wasn't shock. It was recognition. Not of her face, not yet, but of the situation itself. Of the pattern. Of the way everything suddenly made sense in a way I hadn't been ready to accept before. Because the name I had been erasing, the presence I had been ignoring, the secret I had been protecting without fully seeing it, was about to become something I couldn't look away from anymore. And in that moment, sitting alone in that car, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't just covering for Darius Kane. I was protecting a truth that was never meant to stay hidden forever. And the closer I got to it, the more dangerous it became. The image didn't come through all at once. It loaded in pieces, like it was giving me time to change my mind, to lock my phone and pretend I never saw it. First, the background. A restaurant I recognized but couldn't place right away. Then the outline of a man sitting across from someone, posture relaxed in a way I had never seen inside the office. And then, finally, the part that made my grip tighten around my phone. Darius Kane, clear as day, leaning forward, smiling at a woman whose face was turned just enough to hide everything that mattered. I stared at it longer than I should have, zooming in, searching for something I could dismiss, something that would let me convince myself this wasn't what it looked like. But the timestamp was recent. The location matched a place executives from our firm were known to visit. And the way he looked at her, that wasn't professional. That wasn't casual. That was something else entirely. I wish I could say I put the phone down and walked away from it, that I chose distance over curiosity. But curiosity doesn't leave quietly once it has something real to hold on to. It sharpens. It focuses. And that night, sitting in that car with the rain still falling and the building lights flickering behind me, I opened the second message that came right after the first. It wasn't an image this time. It was a single line of text. Check the logs from last Thursday. No explanation. No signature. Just a direction. And for reasons I still can't fully explain, I followed it. The next morning, everything felt the same on the surface. Same lobby. Same greetings. Same quiet tension that came with working in a place where everyone was watching something, even if they weren't sure what. But underneath that, something had shifted for me. Every conversation felt louder. Every glance felt heavier. And when I sat down at my desk and pulled up the system logs from the date in that message, I already knew I wasn't going to like what I found. Still, I kept going. Because once you start looking for the truth, stopping feels worse than whatever you're about to uncover. At first, nothing stood out. Standard entries. Employee access points. Scheduled movements. But then I saw it. A gap. 7 minutes where the system had no record of activity in a section of the building that never went unmonitored. That alone was enough to raise questions. But it wasn't the gap that stayed with me. It was what came right after it. A manual override. Authorized by someone with high-level clearance. Someone who didn't usually handle things like that. Someone like Darius Kane. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen, letting the pieces settle into place whether I wanted them to or not. The erased emails. The altered calendars. The missing logs. The image on my phone. It wasn't random anymore. It wasn't separate incidents I could explain away. It was a pattern. And patterns mean intention. They mean planning. They mean there's something at the center holding it all together. And for the first time, I stopped asking what Darius was doing and started asking why. That question followed me through the rest of the day, through meetings I barely heard and conversations I barely responded to. It stayed with me until late afternoon, when Darius called me into his office again. The same office where everything had started. The same calm expression on his face. The same tone that made everything sound normal even when it wasn't. He didn't mention the logs. He didn't mention the late-night messages. Instead, he handed me another file and asked me to review it. Routine. Simple. Controlled. But there was something different this time. A pause before he spoke again, like he was measuring something I couldn't see. Zaire, he said, you've been doing good work. I trust you. It was the kind of statement that used to feel like recognition. That day, it felt like something else. Like a reminder. Like a warning wrapped in a compliment. I nodded, said what I was expected to say, and left his office with the file in my hands and a weight in my chest that didn't belong there before. That night, I didn't go straight home. I went back to the parking lot, the same spot where everything had started the night before, and I sat there again, phone in hand, waiting. I didn't know who had sent those messages, but I knew they weren't finished. People don't send pieces of something like that unless they want you to see the whole picture eventually. And I was right. The next message came just as the building lights started to dim. Look closer at her. This time, there was another image attached. Clearer. Closer. The same restaurant. The same table. But now her face was visible, just enough to make out details I hadn't noticed before. The way she held herself. The way she looked at him. There was familiarity there. Not just attraction. Not just interest. Something deeper. Something established. And as I studied the image, something else started to surface. A memory I couldn't place at first, but couldn't ignore either. I had seen her before. Not in person. Not directly. But somewhere connected to the company. Something official. I went back inside. The building was quieter than usual, most people already gone, the kind of silence that makes every step echo a little louder. I headed straight to the internal database, the one most employees didn't have a reason to access unless they were looking for something specific. I didn't have a name to search yet, not officially, but I had a face. And sometimes, that's enough. It took longer than I expected, going through records, cross-checking profiles, narrowing down possibilities. But then I found it. Not under her name. Under someone else's. The CEO. I pulled up the profile slowly, like moving too fast would change what I was about to see. Public information. Leadership history. Family details. And then, there it was. A photo from a corporate event, taken months before I joined the company. The CEO standing beside his wife. Smiling. Composed. Untouchable. And next to him, her. Imani Voss. I didn't react right away. I just sat there, staring at the screen, letting the realization settle in fully before I tried to process it. Because this wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a secret relationship hidden behind altered logs and deleted emails. This was something that reached higher than I had expected. Something that connected the most powerful man in the company to the one person I had been helping without even knowing it. And suddenly, every decision I had made felt different. Heavier. Riskier. I closed the file and leaned back, running through every interaction I had with Darius, every request, every moment I chose not to question what I was being asked to do. Because now, those moments weren't isolated anymore. They were connected to something that could take down more than just one person if it ever came to light. And that's when the second part of the realization hit me. If I could find this, someone else could too. Maybe they already had. My phone buzzed again before I could finish that thought. You see it now. I didn't respond. I didn't even know what I would say if I tried. Because whoever was on the other end of that message knew exactly where I was in this, exactly what I had uncovered, exactly how deep I had already gone without realizing it. And if they knew that, then there was something else they probably knew too. Something I hadn't fully considered until that moment. I wasn't just a witness to this anymore. I was part of it. And the moment you become part of something like that, walking away doesn't make you safe. It makes you visible. I stayed there longer than I should have, staring at that last message, letting the weight of it settle into something real. Because once someone tells you, you see it now, there's an expectation that comes with that. An understanding that you're no longer in the dark, and that whatever happens next, you're not just reacting anymore, you're choosing. And the truth is, I didn't feel ready to choose anything. I felt exposed. Every decision I had made up to that point suddenly looked different under this new light. The deleted emails weren't small favors. The altered logs weren't harmless adjustments. They were pieces of something deliberate, something controlled, something that had been built long before I even knew I was part of it. And the closer I looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about Darius and Imani anymore. This was about power, access, and who got to decide what the truth looked like when it was written down. And that realization came with a question I couldn't ignore. If I knew this now, who else did? And more importantly, who was waiting for me to figure it out? The next morning didn't give me time to process any of it. It started with a company-wide email that hit every inbox at exactly 8:03 a.m. Subject line, Internal Audit Review. It was written in the same polished language they always used, careful, controlled, leaving just enough unsaid to make people uneasy without giving them anything solid to react to. But the meaning was clear. Something was being examined. Something that mattered. And as I read through it, one line stood out more than the rest. All departments are expected to fully cooperate with any requests for documentation or access. That wasn't routine. That was a signal. And for the first time since this started, I realized I wasn't just dealing with one secret anymore. I was standing in the middle of something that was about to come apart. I didn't go to Darius right away. I watched him first. From a distance, like I was seeing him for the first time without the influence he used to have over how I interpreted everything he did. He moved through the office the same way he always had. Calm. Focused. Untouched by whatever tension everyone else was starting to feel. If he knew about the audit, he wasn't showing it. If he suspected anything about what I had discovered, he wasn't giving me anything to confirm it. And that was the part that unsettled me the most. Because control like that doesn't come from confidence alone. It comes from experience. From knowing how these situations play out and staying ahead of them before anyone else realizes what's happening. And that raised another question I wasn't ready to answer yet. How many times had he done something like this before? By midday, the requests started coming in. Documents. Access logs. Email archives. Everything I had spent months helping him adjust, clean, and erase was now being quietly pulled back into the light. And I could feel it closing in. Every file I opened felt like it was looking back at me differently now, like it knew what it actually represented. Not just work. Not just responsibility. Evidence. And I wasn't just someone who had seen it. I had touched it. Changed it. Made it disappear. That connection didn't go away just because I understood it now. If anything, it became more solid. More dangerous. And somewhere in the middle of all that, my phone buzzed again. Don't let him get ahead of you. I read that message 3 times before I even looked up from my desk. Because this wasn't just information anymore. It was direction. Whoever was sending these messages wasn't just showing me the truth. They were pushing me toward something. And the timing wasn't random. The audit. The files. The pressure building inside the office. It was all happening at once. And suddenly, it didn't feel like I had stumbled into this. It felt like I had been led here. Step by step. Decision by decision. And now I was exactly where someone wanted me to be. That thought stayed with me until late afternoon, when Darius finally called me into his office again. The same setting. The same controlled environment. But this time, it felt different the moment I walked in. He didn't start with small talk. He didn't hand me a file. He just looked at me for a second longer than usual, like he was measuring something he hadn't needed to measure before. We're going to get some requests over the next few days, he said, his tone steady, almost casual. I need you to make sure everything is aligned. He didn't have to explain what that meant. He never did. But this time, I didn't nod right away. I held his gaze just long enough for something unspoken to pass between us. Not confrontation. Not yet. But recognition. And I think he saw it. Because the next thing he said came with a slight shift in his voice. You understand what's at stake. And that was the moment everything changed. Because for the first time, I did understand. Not just what was at stake for him. For me. For the company. But what it would mean to keep saying yes. To keep adjusting things. To keep protecting a version of the truth that was built on decisions I could no longer pretend I didn't see clearly. And standing there in that office, I realized something I should have understood much earlier. Loyalty isn't neutral. It always points somewhere. And in that moment, I had to decide where mine was going to land. I left his office without giving him the answer he expected. That night, I didn't go home again. I went somewhere else. A place I hadn't thought about in months, not because it wasn't important, but because it wasn't part of the version of my life I had been building inside that company. My older sister, Mia. She didn't work in corporate. She didn't care about titles or promotions or the kind of pressure that came with them. She cared about people. About clarity. About things making sense in a way that didn't require you to ignore your instincts to succeed. And when I sat down across from her and started explaining everything, piece by piece, I could see it in her face before she even said it. You're in this, she told me. Not around it. Not near it. In it. I didn't argue. Because she was right. And hearing it from someone outside that world made it impossible to reshape it into something more comfortable. It was what it was. And the only question left was what I was going to do about it. We talked for hours, going over possibilities, outcomes, risks. Every option came with consequences. Stay quiet, and I protect Darius, but risk being pulled down with him if the audit finds what it's looking for. Speak up, and I expose everything, including my own involvement. Walk away, and hope it all collapses without touching me. But deep down, I knew that last option wasn't real. Not anymore. When I left her place, my phone buzzed again. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Conference Room B. Be there early. No explanation. No name. Just another step. The next morning felt heavier than the others. Slower, even though everything was moving faster around me. I got to the office earlier than usual, the hall's still quiet, the kind of silence that makes you aware of every decision you're about to make. Conference Room B was empty when I walked in. Glass walls. Long table. Screens dark. It looked like every other room in the building. But it didn't feel like it. I sat down and waited, my phone face down in front of me, my mind running through everything that could happen next. At exactly 8:57, the door opened. It wasn't Darius. It wasn't anyone I expected. It was someone from internal compliance. Followed by another. Then another. And behind them, someone I had only ever seen in company-wide meetings. The CEO. He walked in without looking at me directly, took a seat at the far end of the table, and for a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched just long enough to make it clear this wasn't a conversation I was controlling anymore. Then one of them turned to me and said the words I had been trying not to hear since this all started. Zaire, we need you to walk us through everything. And just like that, every path I had considered collapsed into one. There wasn't going to be a quiet way out of this. No careful step back. No clean separation between what I knew and what I had done. The truth wasn't something I could manage anymore. It was something that was about to come out, with or without me. And in that moment, I understood the final piece of it. The messages. The timing. The way everything had unfolded just enough for me to see it before this meeting happened. This wasn't random. Someone had made sure I would be here. Ready or not. I took a breath, looked at the people sitting across from me, and made the only decision that still felt like it belonged to me. I told them everything. Not just the surface details. Not just the parts that made me look like a bystander. Everything. The requests. The changes. The name I kept seeing before I understood why it mattered. Imani Voss. The connection to the CEO. The missing logs. The overrides. The pattern. I didn't leave anything out. And as I spoke, I could feel something shift in the room. Not surprise. Not exactly. More like confirmation. Like I was filling in gaps they had already started to see on their own. When I finished, no one spoke right away. The silence returned, heavier this time, carrying the weight of everything that had just been said. And then the CEO leaned forward slightly, his expression controlled in a way that felt practiced, and asked one question. Why didn't you come forward sooner? It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't sympathetic. It was something else. Something that forced me to answer honestly, whether I wanted to or not. Because I didn't realize what I was part of, I said. And for the first time since this started, that felt like the truth in its simplest form. What happened after that moved quickly. Too quickly to follow in real time. Darius was removed from his position before the end of the day. Access revoked. Office cleared. The kind of quiet exit that says more than any public statement ever could. The audit findings expanded. The financial irregularities tied back to accounts that connected him and Imani in ways that went beyond anything I had initially suspected. It wasn't just an affair. It was leverage. Access. Decisions made in private that affected outcomes in public. And once it started coming out, it didn't stop. As for Imani Voss, her name didn't stay hidden anymore either. The connection to the CEO turned what could have been an internal matter into something larger. Something that couldn't be contained inside company walls. Statements were made. Positions were questioned. And the version of the company I thought I understood began to change in ways that made it clear this wasn't just about one person's actions. It was about how much had been allowed to exist without being challenged. And me? I didn't walk away untouched. There's no version of this where I could. My involvement didn't disappear just because I chose to speak. It was part of the record now. Part of the story. But so was my decision to stop. To tell the truth when it mattered most. And in the end, that was the line that defined everything that came after. I left the company a few months later. Not because I was forced to, but because staying didn't feel like something I could do anymore without carrying all of it with me every day. Some places change you in ways that don't go away just because the situation ends. And sometimes, the only way forward is to step out of the environment where those decisions were made and figure out who you are without them. I still think about that night in the parking lot. The rain. The message. The moment before I opened it, when everything was still what I thought it was. Because that's the part people don't talk about enough. Not the scandal. Not the exposure. But the moment right before everything changes. When you're still standing on one version of your life, not knowing you're about to step into another. I lied for him. I protected him. I destroyed evidence for him. And if I had known who he was sleeping with, I would have never said yes. If you enjoyed this story, kindly share, follow and drop a comment. We appreciate every one of them. We will see you on the next one.